365. How's a non-football Friday? It's a football Friday, just not for the Philadelphia Eagles because they don't play till next week, earn themselves a bye, and we're questioning how healthy they will be going into that game. Here to lend us a helping hand is sports physician Dr. Jessica Flynn, Doc Jody McDonald, and John McMullen here. How you doing?
I'm doing great. How are you guys?
You're not playing through pain, no injuries for you. You're ready to go for the postseason here?
I am ready to go.
All right. It's good to see you, Doc. Jalen Hurts, we'll start there, obviously. One of the biggest stories, not only here in Philadelphia, but the entire NFL. So, but treat me like an idiot because I am an idiot. But, we've had sort of this gamesmanship with Nick Sirianni, talked about Jalen's superhero-like ability to come back from injuries, which I think was a disservice to him. First off, can you explain the SC joint shoulder sprain, which is a little more uncommon than the AC, and the different grades? Because we were told it was a grade 2, and then I want to get to the timetable if that's the case.
Of course. So when he came down on the side of his shoulder, he kind of came directly down on the side of it with force. There really are 3 main injuries that can happen with that, and they both are around the clavicle or the collarbone. So you can either separate or sprain the joint at the shoulder end, which is the AC joint. You can crack the collarbone or just break it in half, or you can separate it at the end that's closest to the midline, which is the sternoclavicular joint. It's the joint where the clavicle attaches or communicates with the sternum, the breastbone, right? So we talk about a shoulder injury. You see him listed as a shoulder injury, but it's not really. It's like right in the middle of his chest. And this injury is pretty common in the NFL more than other places just because of that mechanism happens a lot during a tackle, right? And it can be an emergency. So if that joint dislocates to the back, then the bone can go and start to really interfere with some of the major blood vessels and the ability to breathe. So obviously that wasn't the case in this situation. It was a sprain. And it's something that athletes can play through, but it's painful. A grade 2 injury means that there is partial tearing of the ligaments that attach the little rubber bands that hold that joint together. And so there can be a little bit of instability, like clicking when he goes to throw, he might feel like a little bit of movement there, which is uncomfortable. And it just adds to what really at the end of the day, as long as it's a safe situation, is mostly a pain tolerance type of an injury.
Doc, we've heard forever, and John and I certainly have been around longer than you have, but forever the story was in the NFL. Well, just shoot him up and get him out there. That you can take a shot for pain depending on the injury and where it is. Is Jalen's injury that type of injury? Is it something that they could give him a shot for that would dull and numb the area, and certainly going to pay a price for it afterwards? It's going to be that much more painful when the Novocaine wears off. But is that type of an injury the one we're talking about here with Jalen Hurts?
It's generally in that category of injury, yes. Again, this joint's a little bit more important than the little joint at the other end, which, Jimmy Garoppolo got a ton of slack for not just taking a shot and playing, when he was with the Patriots years ago. This one's a little bit more of a vital joint, and you want to know about a little discomfort and instability there. Pain medication is an option. So an anti-inflammatory, sometimes they'll give them. I agree. I don't like to use the term shoot 'em up because, it just sounds like the way that the NFL was in the 80s. And I like we've at least come. I mean, if the last week has taught you nothing, I think that the NFL has come a little bit far from those days. It's still a work in progress, but, we're moving in the right direction.
Yeah, that's fair. And Josh Sweat's another star player was, scared. Everybody was stretchered off in week 17, and he's fine. So they were very it was precautionary and scared the hell out of everybody, but it shows you how far the NFL has come because he's a 10 plus sack guy, and they it was early in the game and they said no, we're not gonna risk anything. So there has been a lot of it's a lot better than it was in the Wild Wild West. So no question about that. Getting back to Jalen though, in this particular in injury, you have timetable obviously, and at some point it's going to heal. Um, but the Eagles kind of talked about there was, and I shouldn't even say the Eagles, but there were certain NFL sources that talked about early in the injury there was risk of maybe breaking the collarbone, maybe a more serious injury. At what point do you kind of turn that corner and it becomes about just pain rather than risking further injury?
Yeah, right after this injury, so I do a weekly call with the 33rd team, and we talk about stuff like this. And early on, I said, the main risk of him going back right away is that he gets thrown down on that shoulder, especially, I know we're going to talk about Lane Johnson, but especially without Lane Johnson there,
Yeah.
that he gets thrown down on that shoulder and he injures the joint even further. That was like the big thing to prevent, less the clavicle, in my opinion, the clavicle breaking. Of course, I've never seen the images, yada, yada, but that would be the thing I would worry about. I think, that still obviously is a risk. It's going to be through the playoffs and hopefully deep until mid-February. That's always going to be a risk that he can injure it further. He is exactly where I expected him to be. I expected if they weren't able to, clinch the bye, that he'd come back and play and try to clinch that bye because he really needs those 2 weeks to heal for the playoffs. So he's kind of following that pattern. Every time he plays, he's going to irritate this. And then the week after, he's going to have to recover. And so it will just be a matter of, trying to avoid getting thrown down, maybe throwing away a ball so he doesn't get thrown down on that shoulder. Being careful and kind of managing this through the playoffs so he can recover in the offseason.
You mentioned Lane Johnson, so we'll go to him next. He's been out the last several weeks, has the torn abductor muscle. It's something that needs to be operated on, but he has decided not to have the operation till after the season is over and done with. This type of injury, how much is Lane putting himself at risk?
Well, Jody, I will correct you and say it's not his
adductor.
adductor.
Yeah.
The reason I'm going to correct you is because that's his butt. He did not tear his butt. He teared his groin, which is the adductor.
Yeah.
And the problem with that injury is that you can't do anything without that muscle. Like it is so, especially for linemen, it's lateral movement. It's just walking. It's just standing up. You're using that tendon. This is also a significant pain tolerance thing. It's not going to heal. We know he needs surgery. So the question is, can he gut it out and be effective? We know he can gut it out, but can he be effective in doing that? Because he needs to generate power with his legs. So, I'm happy to see him out there, at practice, whether or not he's working with the team or alongside them on the side. But what we'll really know, like, halfway into the game when he comes back from halftime, when he's been sitting, if he makes it to halftime, which, fingers crossed, comes after sitting in that locker room for 20 minutes or whatever it is, it'll be really telling how he's moving and how effective he's able to move.
Yeah. I'm sure you're familiar with Dr. William Myers, who was from Philadelphia. He's sort of the core muscle guy in the NFL. Everybody goes to Dr. Myers. He hates when people use the term sports hernia. And he's tried to change that because there's so many different injuries with core muscles, and they could be varying ones. Is this one, are you surprised that Lane is going to try to play through this particular injury?
No, I would have given, if I saw an athlete with the injury that we've heard he has, again, I don't know for sure that's the exact right thing, but I would certainly have said, look, what do you want to do? You're going to have surgery. I don't know. It's maybe 50-50 that you're going to be able to really be super effective all the way through the playoffs, or it's 70, whatever number he was given. You're not going to really do further damage. You need surgery anyway. Do you want to try to tough it out? I think, if we repair this in the off season, you should be back within 3 months. But why not? Why not try to support him, give him some medication, let him rehab, and see if he can get through these games and be effective.
This is probably an unfair question, but I'm going to ask it to you anyway. But if you want to dodge it, feel free. We all like, as sports fans, percentages. We want to know what percentage is a guy. What percent is he? 90, 80, 70, 50, 100, where we all understand 100. And then everything falls into your own grading category.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to ask about an individual player. I want to ask you about the team. The Eagles got an extra week of rest because they finished with the number one record in the NFC, so they got to bye, and they know they're getting home teams. What kind of percentage do you think you can kick your game up just with a week's rest at the end of the season? Now, you went to a 18-week, 17-game grind, and then you get a bye week. They all strive to get to the bye week during the regular season. Yeah. The Eagles are only one of two teams that get a bye week here going into the postseason. What kind of percentage advantage does that give the Eagles?
I would typically say for the average team that everyone's dealing with something, right? So these like little nagging soft tissue things like a hamstring or quad, whatever, I'd be like, oh yeah, it's probably helpful. I don't know how helpful it is, maybe 5% helpful, 10% helpful, whatever. Plus the extra time for game planning, theoretically, extra focus, right? Because you had a week off, so to speak. But I think for this team, it was so critical. And it's why I really thought that Jalen would come back and play last week, because these two injuries at these two massively important positions for this specific team, an extra week of rest is critical, absolutely critical. So I think this was a huge win for them to be able to get that bye.
A lesser known injury, at least nationally, but kind of big for the Eagles, is their punter went down, Aaron Cepas. And I don't know if you saw the play, Jessica, but it was against the Giants, and he got a punt blocked. He tried to pick up the football. He ran. It was a heck of a play, but he got injured at the very end. And we all thought, he was done for the year. And Aaron showed up in the locker room yesterday, and I was talking to him, and he said he had a high ankle sprain. Turns out a torn deltoid ligament, and he avoided surgery. And he was he just got, he was in a cast to start a little rollabout, and he just ditched a walking boot. Torn deltoid ligament, that can heal without surgery?
Yes. And actually, I did see the play. Now you reminded me. It did kind of look like a high ankle, but then it rolled a little bit. And that gets the deltoid, which is a giant ligament along the inner part of your ankle. They absolutely can heal, but they're very painful. They take longer to heal than the standard inversion where your ankle kind of turns in. That's the basketball low ankle kind of injury. The medial ones, the deltoid ones, take longer to heal. And that's probably why he was not weight bearing at first on that little roller scooter. But they're nasty injuries, but they do definitely heal, and no long-term consequences. Patients do really well.
Wow.
Want to move away from the Eagles for just 1 second, if that's okay, Doc. It looks like the Miami Dolphins are going to have to play this week without Tua Tagovailoa, who has been twice in the concussion protocol this year. A lot of debate on whether he should have been in the protocol in a game earlier this year when it looked like he couldn't just walk on his own as he got up after being hit in the game. I think most people understand the Tua situation. NFL in general have attempted to advance, to make better their concussion protocol, outside observers and medical people at the game to judge the players and the like. Your estimation of the job that the NFL has done to better protect their players with the concussion issues that are part of the game in the National Football League?
That's a loaded question, but I am happy to tackle it. So I do think they've made needed changes this year. I think the change in the protocol to have these red flag kind of things where you just pull a guy no matter what is important. The follow through is even more important. So spotters actually seeing these things and actually pulling these guys from the field is important. Are they moving in the right direction? Yes, but they're moving too slowly, in my opinion. And I do respect the fact that they have to balance this with, they don't want to pull every guy every play ends almost every play ends with a hit. There's always contact on the line, right? So guys hit their heads on the turf, and we don't see it on TV because they don't get up and wobble or whatever, right? But you don't want to be pulling guys, and guys don't want to be pulled if they're fine, if they just hit the turf and they're totally fine. So you do have to have some kind of guidelines, and that's what they're attempting to do with the NFL protocol. So I do think it can, or concussion protocol. I do think it can get better, and I do think they need to work a little faster, but concussions will never, ever, ever disappear from this game. No helmet. There's no magic helmet that's going to stop it.
Yeah.
So they do. It is something that they're going to have to continue to get better at diagnosing.
The scariest of all the situations, obviously, was Damar Hamlin. So, I mean, that from that perspective, that was a play that we see all the time, and all of a sudden you see something that thankfully didn't turn into a tragedy. But as a position, when you see something like that, is that just an outlier? Is it a concern? What was your sort of frame work when you see something that happen? Now, obviously, we know it's a dangerous and violent game, but that wasn't the typical. We see more dangerous hits than that all the time, and this could have been the worst situation we've ever seen in the NFL. Thankfully, Damar's doing well right now.
Yeah, I'm so happy to be able to talk about this on the other side. It was terrifying for sure. But this is absolutely a freak thing. Okay. This type of an injury typically does not occur in football. Okay. So it's an incredibly rare thing to happen. And football is not the place where we normally see it. We normally see it in lacrosse or baseball, where there's a very small, forceful object hitting someone in the chest and impacting at just the right time, at just the right spot. Very unusual to happen. If this was a result of the hit, if this was commotio cordis, where the heart gets hit and kind of jiggled at just the wrong time in the electrical activity and it short circuits, that's much more common in other sports. A cardiac arrest is much more common in sports like basketball, where we see more like genetic predisposition, tall guys with long arms, hyper athletic. They're more likely to have underlying cardiac things that can cause a cardiac event like this. So while it was super scary, I just try to reassure people this is not a football specific thing.
Doc, as you could well imagine, we talked about it for days after what happened. And yes, we're all so happy that we're talking about this on the road to recovery for Mr. Hamlin. But I would take calls on the air and be at, well, what can the NFL do to keep this from happening again? Even acknowledging it's a rare and unique and kind of a very unpredictable situation that transpired on the field in Cincinnati. Is there anything the NFL could do? I just blindly guessed maybe there's an extra piece of equipment you can put on the chest that covers the heart. That's not really the case. Usually the shoulder pads come down above the heart. Do you think the NFL could or should take any steps to add a piece of equipment to cut out even further shrink the possibility of something like this happening again?
No. I think there are much bigger injury concerns like playing surface to tackle that can be life altering for athletes than that. I think the crazy thing is that medical team that was there literally broke down their response. They have video, they have radio. They literally looked at it and were like, well, we saved this guy's life, but we could do better next time. That is the most critical thing they can do. And maybe not prevent this. It's so rare. But be ready in case anyone goes down, be it a player, coach, staff member, anyone, to have that ready.
And they deserve all the credit in the world, because the silver lining was to have that medical personnel right there. Because if you have a cardiac event and nobody's there, then it does turn into a tragedy. So that was the silver lining, and they were heroes. I mean, that was unbelievable. And how quickly they jumped into action, and they're still thinking about how they can do it better. So that was, but we do have a couple more minutes, so I have to get back to traditional football and traditional injuries. Lamar Jackson, another playoff quarterback. He's been out for 5 games. Looks like he's not going to play again. PCL sprain, maybe grade 2, maybe grade 3. Dippers with everybody. Obviously, we always say you can't look at the film of the injury. Does it surprise you that Lamar has been out as long as he's been out?
I did not think this was a 3-week injury. That's for sure. When I saw those numbers come out, I said, I don't know, in a mobile quarterback, the PCL really, if you tear it significantly, can lead to instability, where a quick guy who's cutting, trying to change direction at speed, the knee's not going to feel right. And so that's something you have to feel comfortable getting used to. But I do think this is an outlier that he's not, especially given the time of the season, that we're in the postseason. It's unusual that he wouldn't be able to be back. Do I doubt that he has significant swelling, pain, and feeling of instability? No, I really do think he has all of those things. But I would say this is something that some players in this position would choose to play through. I don't know if it was my kid, if I would want him to play through it. So, you can take that. I can really only comment on the medical part in that it's not healed yet.
Yeah.
And ideally, if it was a college athlete in the off season, you wouldn't have him training through an injury like this.
Doc, last one from me, and we'll circle back to the Eagles and Jalen Hurts. Yesterday, he did not throw the ball in practice with any of the snaps that they ran. He threw just light tossed on the side. But in any of the practice plays they ran, he didn't throw the football. Yeah. He threw it in Chicago the day he got hurt. After he got hurt, played well in the fourth quarter. Then he took 2 weeks off. He threw it last week and seemed to me to throw it okay. They specifically had a game plan to not put him at risk with running plays, but his throwing looked okay to me. And yesterday they went super protective and didn't have him throw the ball at all. Where's Jalen Hurts at? We're asking you to do this from 1,000 miles away and give us your best analysis. But why do you think the Eagles are handling him the way they're handling him this week?
Oh my gosh, shut the guy down. Just let him rest. This tissue has to recover. It just got traumatized for 4 quarters of football. Let him rest. Let everything heal up. You have 2 weeks. It's not like he doesn't know how to throw a football. It's not like he doesn't know the playbook. Like, there is no benefit to this guy throwing a ball this week. So I would just say, Eagles fans, take a deep breath. I'm not worried. I actually have a good friend from high school who texted me from Vegas last night. Jess, I'm really worried. Why isn't he throwing a football? And I was like, dude, chill. Take a breath. So shout out to Bobby.
All right. You just calmed a lot of people, Jess. Doc, at Doc Flynn NFL. You can follow Jessica Flynn there, 33rd football team. Our friend Paul Domowitch, also a contributor there. Boston Sports Journal. Don't hold that against her. She does a tremendous thing here in Philadelphia. And DocFlynn.com. You can see her there as well. And you just made everybody really happy. Say, chill out, Philadelphia, chill out.
Doc,
Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you very much for coming on with us. We appreciate it greatly. Enjoy the weekend's football.
Thanks. Enjoy the bye week, guys.
That is Dr. Jessica Flynn here with us on Birds 365. All right, Johnny Mac, Jody Mac. She's being optimistic from afar, which is good.
Chill out. She's right as far as, and I go back to the start of the show, Jody. It was a PR thing to have him out there. They don't want to they don't want people in Philadelphia panicking. They're well aware of the eyeballs on this. They don't want, so they threw him out there.
But here, John, here's where I don't know that I can agree with you. When do the Eagles ever care about the PR thing?
They do. They care about
John, how many guys get listed as rest every single week during a practice, and you're an Eagle fan and go, wait a minute, how much do these guys make? And they're resting him in the middle of the season. They do what they have to do to keep their team in the best position to win. They don't worry about what McMullen or McDonald or Stu from North Philly says. They do what's best for their team every single week. They never bow to PR.
Well, I can definitively say that's not true, because when I write something they don't like, I hear about it inside of seconds. They care very much about what people think and about how things are framed. Now, there's certain things; those are two completely different things. Yeah, they don't give a rat's ass about people who don't understand rest and maintenance in the modern NFL with guys who aren't hurt. Yeah, they don't give a rat's ass about that. But in this instance, when somebody really is hurt and somebody really is, early on in this process, I even got a text from somebody involved in the issue, and the words "calm down," people were used. They're very cognizant of PR and how things are framed. But there are certain issues, those are not comparable. Yes, when it comes to rest and maintenance and the 50 veteran players that they rest every week and they have all year, yes, they don't care. They don't care what people say. They don't care if people say, oh, they make a lot of money, they should practice. They don't care. When it comes to certain things, they care very, very much, Jody.
Okay.
Very much.
Can you guess or define the line where they don't give a you know what and they care greatly? Something's got to be there in the middle that this is one that we must care greatly about and handle one way.
Well,
and this is one that we don't care what the hell anybody says. If you got a best guess scenario for me, what divides
the starting
those two
quarterback of
potential
the
ways of
Philadelphia
looking
Eagles?
at things?
If you go back to Carson Wentz, remember when Joe Santoliquito had the big story that went, the Eagles immediately. I was at the Super Bowl at the time. The Eagles immediately called sort of a summit with about 5 or 6 reporters so Carson Wentz could decide. There are certain things, Jody, and the starting quarterback of the Philadelphia Eagles, that has a lot to do with it. Now, this is injury related. That was sort of controversy related. But there are levels. Now, can I give you a clear what level reaches that level? Well, meaningless stuff, and they look at your example as meaningless stuff. Fletcher Cox getting a maintenance day, they don't care about. They don't care about. But stuff that they think is going to be misinformation or people are going to get it wrong or things like that, they care very much about, and they're very cognizant of, and they're very, I would argue, too cognizant of, to be honest.
Well, then I'm going to come down on the side of Dr. Jessica Flynn here, not on the Philadelphia Eagles. There was no reason he had to be out there for PR sake, for the right optics sake. If he wasn't going to throw and he wasn't going to do any major participating, just let him stay. AJ Brown had the day off yesterday, so I guess you're telling me it's a quarterback thing. That the quarterback they handle one way, and basically everybody else they handle another.
That's got a lot to do with it. I'm not saying that's the only thing. They want to stem the panic, and I don't agree. I think they should have sat him as well. I agree with Dr. Flynn as well. I agree with you. I don't think he should have been out there. Rest him. But, then we're going to talk and we're going to talk and we're still going to talk about it. I've said from the start, and I should have asked Dr. Flynn this. People have been concerned about him throwing the football. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is the contact part of it. Now, there's some, as she mentioned, there could be some discomfort throwing the football, but I don't think that's the issue as far as, getting through this whole process. It's getting hit. It's the physicality, and that's why they took the zone read off the table against the Giants, and they were throwing it, 8 times or whatever it was to start the game. He's going to fight through that, but can he fight through a direct hit? I think that's the bigger issue. I think that's always been the bigger issue.
So if yesterday was to quell the tide of questions about the Jalen Hurts and what kind of, just your judgment, either your fellow Eagle Beat guys chiming in with opinions here on the stream on Birds 365. I didn't get a chance to listen to much of WIP yesterday, so I don't have what I feel is my usual finger on the pulse of the Philadelphia. I listened to it a little bit coming back from Penn Medicine. Did it work? Did they actually get the desired results that they wanted from making this
Well,
decision?
and by the way,
Jalen?
by the way, this is me speculating. This is not,
Right. Oh no,
part
I
of it.
get that. Yeah,
I'm just throwing out there because I don't know why he was out there. And I just thought of another potential reason. And that's Jalen himself. Maybe Jalen wanted to be out there and say, well, let me dress for, for his teammates and the leadership aspect of it that we always talk about that he's so good with. That might have been a part of it. It could be as simple as that. Did they stem it though? If that part of it is in the equation, you can't really tell because it happened, Jody. But I guarantee you this. If he wasn't out there, yeah, there'd be a lot more hand wringing. If he wasn't out there, people would be saying, what the hell is going on? So I can't prove it.
They couldn't just chalk it up to rest, and just have him stand next to AJ Brown. If everybody else played, and the only one who's not practicing is Jalen Hurts, yeah, then it sticks up like a sore thumb. But they had a bunch of veterans not participate yesterday, and it could have been Jalen Hurts just as easily as anyone else.
Well, the difference between AJ and Jalen is AJ is relatively healthy, and everyone knows that. And Jalen was very limited against the Giants, and everyone knows that. So nobody's talking about Lane Johnson. Lane was limited, but we all know Lane was limited. Why Lane was limited. In the case of AJ, nobody was saying, "Oh, AJ." I took a picture of AJ right away, not participating. Just to say, "Hey, AJ's not participating." There was never a thought in my mind that AJ was hurt. Because obviously they're giving him a maintenance day. They're resting him. There's a difference. Everybody knows, and everybody just saw Jalen Hurts be severely limited against a bad football team. And to be honest, he played his worst game of the season, understandably so. There's a difference there.
All right, let me play devil's coach advocate. If Jalen didn't practice yesterday, stood on the sideline near AJ Brown, and after the practice, you got a chance to talk to Coach Sirianni, and he stood up and stared John McMullen and all the other beat writers in the place and said, if we were playing this week, Jalen would have practiced today. Fear not, that was the case. Because we're not playing for 9 or 10 days, yes, we erred on the side of caution. We gave Jalen a rest day. You think that Eagle Nation goes, bullshit, Sirianni, what the are you talking about? You can't trot that weak stuff out. We don't believe you for a millisecond. Or do they say, all right, Coach, if you say so? Which do you think is more likely?
Well, if they've listened to Nick Sirianni about injuries all year, they wouldn't believe a word coming out of his mouth, number one. Number two, Nick Sirianni doesn't talk after practice, and he specifically talks before practice, so he doesn't have to talk to us about injuries, and he admits that because he doesn't want to give up information.
Yeah, but Jalen talked after practice. So if Jalen had given that speech, would they believe Jalen?
Probably not, but he didn't give that speech. One of the concerns is the speech
couldn't give that speech because he practiced. I'm talking a hypothetical.
Well, no, but
if he hadn't practiced,
but he again reiterated how difficult what he's going through is. So I don't think it changes from the aspect of Jalen is telling the truth, and he's in a lot of pain. And he's fighting through something, as he said, in a very public fashion. So I don't think that changes. Jalen's actually been relatively honest. He doesn't like to talk about specifics for obvious reasons. And I get that part of it. And I'm trying to look for the quote while I'm saying this here. I think this has been a very public venture, but I've been able to navigate that. I have no problem with doing that. That's the thing I have to kind of get my mind right to do. It takes what it takes at the end of the day. If you want something done, sometimes you have to do what you have to do. And before he mentioned again that, he's hurt. So, I mean, he's been relatively honest about the fact that he's dealing with something.
Right. And that's one of the reasons why I think had he sat and he came in and just listen, it's bothered me a little bit, but I don't need to practice today. I'll practice next when we actually have a game, when we're in game week. He said, good thing we had a bye week. Well, they half-hearted it yesterday.
Well, that's another, when players don't practice, they don't have to talk to the media. The NFL has rules that you have to talk to the media if you're healthy, and if you're injured, you don't have to talk to the media. That probably would have created a larger firestorm because he wouldn't have talked to the media.
Now you're getting into a PR evaluation that I could actually wrap my head around. The Eagles said, yeah, we kind of we don't want to open that door of A, not practicing, and B, he's not available to the media.
Yeah. And that's the starting quarterback.
Then the speculation is going to start to run rampant.
Exactly. And they're very, very cognizant of these things.
Hey, John McMullen, giving you some good insight behind the Eagles and how potentially they handle some things. I'm Jody McDonald, the Mac and Mac guys here on Birds 365. Good spot coming up next hour, about 20 minutes from now. Bo Wolf for the Athletics. Been covering the Birds for years. Bo's going to hop on. We haven't had him on in months. Looking forward to talking to him about 20 minutes from now. Hour 2 of Birds 365.